first Jews that came to Italy even predate the Roman period, because they came at the time of the Maccabees looking for mercenary soldiers, and so that was several hundred years BCE. And now in Pompeii, to see the ruins there after the eruption of Vesuvius, there is now a specifically Jewish tour available, because they have found the area where the Jews lived, and also the fact that many of these Jews functioned as indentured servants, and had an area where they lived, had a synagogue, and various artifacts have been uncovered, which makes the tour for Jews and others particularly exciting.
Well, I'll tell you, for me personally, because I also come from a Sephardic background, this is particularly enriching, and I'll tell you why. Because there are various theories of who the modern Jews are. Where did they come from? And one way of disconnecting Jews from their actual history, and particularly Sephardic Jews, meaning directly back to Spanish Jewry and then back to Roman Jewry and back to Greek times, is to say, oh, the European Jews, particularly the Eastern European Jews, are actually coming from a kingdom in what would be Russia today, the Khazars, and really there's no geographic or spiritual or historic connection between all of these Jews in Europe and the land of Israel. And I think pretty much our traditions would make it quite clear that we have a direct line back to Eretz HaKodesh, to the Holy Land.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. One other thing about strangers at my door, I have to tell you that I don't have anything to show you, and for a good reason, but there are many, many other artifacts that come my way, and these are in the form of jewelry, Jewish jewelry, where beautiful cameos, where the etching is the Magen David, beautiful earrings with the pomegranates. And women wear these, they come and they show them to me, and they say, what's really interesting, we wear these on Friday night. And I say, why? Well, because we always did. And we just have we always did. And so that may be the only link to Judaism that some of our villagers have here. And villagers, I mean, not only in Sarasota, but many of these little mountain towns. Lighting candles is long gone. That tradition may have passed. Eating kosher ritual killing of the meat, processing, salting meat, all of that may have gone. But for some people, it is putting on their Jewish jewelry on Friday night.
Well, I think that is a great place for us to tie up this episode, because every woman loves good jewelry, and what's better than jewelry that was like passed down? You know, my favorite pieces that I have came from my grandmother, and who knows where some of those pieces came from. So this has been another great episode. Rabbi, any closing comments before we turn it over to Carl to share his thoughts?
Well, I will mention that there is a special meal called the Mimuna that happens on the first day after Passover, when families eat. They're leavening for the first time. They introduce bread back onto the family table. This is a Sephardic tradition, and at the Mimuna meal, the oldest person in the family gives a piece of jewelry to a younger relative. So there you go, good jewelry.
Gotta have good jewelry. All right, Carl, what's your closing thoughts for this week's episode?
I think I mentioned this in another show, but this, anyone who's grown up, certainly in New York, as I did, in Queens, where high school was, 1/3 Jewish, 1/3 Italian, 25% African American, and 25% Irish. Invariably, if the different ethnic groups, and we were all born in America, but we all had grandparents who spoke some other language. But invariably, if there was a connection with another ethnic group, and it was the Jewish kids and the Italian kids. And I remember always feeling when I went into an Italian home, it was like being in a Jewish home. There was a grandparent who spoke another language. Everybody was worried about if you had eaten enough. There was a tremendous emphasis on you know, how are you doing in school? You know, you'd get clobbered if you weren't doing well. And this was, and by the way, if there were intermarriages, I'm talking going back, say, you know, 40 years, there was not a lot of intermarriages, certainly more today. But at the time, if in my neighborhood there were mixed Jewish, non-Jewish families, almost invariably it would be a Jewish-Italian marriage. So I think we really do, right up to today, and what we're discovering through Rabbi, is that this sense that Italians and Jews have of some mystical connection that we couldn't place our hands. I think we're finding it here, and without a doubt that there is this kind of. It's also why Jews in Italy, you didn't have in Italy the kind of anti-Semitism you had in Central and Northern Europe. Jews were integrated, by and large, were accepted, were integrated into Italian society. I mentioned, and with this I'll close, that Laura Capone, who was Jewish, Sephardic, and married to Enrico Fermi, who was the great physicist, one of the great physicists of the 20th century, who was not Jewish, but they were married. They had to get married in a court because they couldn't have a religious marriage. And Laura Capone's father was one of the highest-ranking naval officers, an admiral in the Italian Navy in World War I. And you know that was totally acceptable in Italy. So I think it's also very touching that Italy has this very strong tradition of tolerance. I mean, the overall Italy, and I think that's one we see today.
Because half of us are Jews.
There you
That's
go.
the reason.
All right, everyone. And I actually fall into that category of being a Jewish person married to an Italian. My daughter's last name is Capizzoli. So there you go. We're all here. Well, this has been another wonderful episode of Secret Jews. Today's episode, Strangers at My Door. Rabbi shared some stories of people that actually hike up the mountain, and I can tell you, having been there just a little under a year ago, it is a bit of a hike. You have to really have a purpose to want to share these stories with Rabbi, so we commend those people that seek her out to connect with her. This has been another episode of Secret Jews, uncovering hidden Jewish traditions. Join us again for our next episode, and we look forward to sharing these stories.